Tonight, let me tell you a story from the north, where winters are long and spring comes slowly, almost shyly, as if it has to ask permission from the snow before stepping onto the land. In one quiet village by the fjord, people believed that when the first small bell rang after winter, the season itself leaned forward to listen. They said that sound carried the warmth of the god Freyr, who watched over sunlight, growing fields, and the joy of harvest. The bell was not grand or heavy. It was only the size of a man's hand, cast in bronze and polished by the careful work of a village craftsman. Yet when it chimed, neighbors paused, smiled, and felt the world soften. This was Freyr's summer bell, and its story is a gentle one, not of battles or storms, but of patience, light, and the way a small ritual can open great doors. The bellmaker's name was Arvid. He was not young, but his shoulders still carried strength from years of shaping metal at the forge. His house stood near the edge of the river, where ice cracked slowly in spring. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and bronze dust. On his work table, a lamp burned with quiet flame, and beside it lay the little bell. Arvid polished it with a cloth, rubbing in circles until it caught the faint light like the glow of dawn. The sound of the cloth was soft, steady, like breathing. He whispered as he worked, not in prayer exactly, but in gratitude. He thanked Freyr for holding the seed under snow, for guarding the orchard trees, for letting the first shoots push upward through thawed soil. Outside, he could hear the drip of melting ice. That drip was music to his ears, a rhythm that told him winter was loosening its hold. The village believed this bell had a special task. At dusk, on the first day when snow finally melted from the threshold of the meeting hall, Arvid would stand at the doorway and ring it once. Only once. The note was enough. Its echo carried across the still air, through streets where neighbors leaned from windows, and down toward the harbor where fishermen mended nets. People did not cheer or shout. Instead, they listened quietly. Some closed their eyes. Some reached for the hands of their children. The sound of the bell told them that the light was returning in truth, not just in promise. It told them they could plan for fields, weddings, and journeys. In its tone, they felt the presence of Freyr, the god of life renewed. Legends say Freyr himself carried gifts of peace rather than weapons. He was linked to golden light, to the green of crops, to the sweetness of fruit. His name was spoken when people sowed seed or built homes, because he was thought to bless growth and settlement. In the sagas, there are tales of him riding a shining boar whose bristles lit the night, and of him giving away his sword for love, choosing gentleness over war. But in this village, people remembered him most through the bell. They said he liked small sounds that reached every heart, rather than great noises that frightened. And so the bronze note at dusk was his chosen greeting. As Arvid polished the bell that evening, his granddaughter Astrid sat by the hearth, braiding straw into small mats. She was young, with bright eyes that often asked more questions than the old man could answer. She asked, "Grandfather, how can such a tiny sound carry a whole season? How can one bell bring summer closer?" Arvid smiled, laying the cloth aside. He lifted the bell and let it ring softly, just once. The note drifted through the room, mixing with the crackle of firewood. "Do you hear it?" he asked. Astrid nodded. "It sounds like the river when it first runs free." Arvid touched her braid gently. "That is the secret. A sound is never alone. It meets memory, it meets hope, and together they grow larger than the ear can measure." Outside, the last light of day softened on snow patches. Smoke from chimneys curled upward like prayers. Villagers prepared bread and ale for the gathering, knowing that tonight they would share more than food. They would share trust that the world turns again toward warmth. In one telling, they said the bell had been blessed by Freyr himself, touched by his hand when the village first began. In another, they said it was only human craft, shaped with patience, and that the god simply smiled upon it. Either way, it was enough. The bell rang, and the air seemed lighter. As the lamp dimmed and Astrid leaned against her grandfather's side, he told her that rituals are like bridges. They do not force the river to flow, but they let people cross together. The bell did not bring the sun, but it helped hearts open to receive it. She rested her head, listening to his slow breathing. The bronze bell gleamed softly in the twilight, waiting for its moment. And as the first stars appeared, the village settled into a calm expectancy, warmed by the thought that summer's footsteps were already near. The evening deepened, and in the village square, neighbors gathered slowly, lanterns glowing in their hands like small suns carried into the night. Arvid stood by the wooden door of the meeting hall, the little bronze bell hidden under his cloak to keep the cold from it. Astrid walked beside him, her cheeks flushed from the chill air and from the excitement of being part of the ritual. Around them, snow still clung to roof edges, yet the sound of dripping water from eaves was steady, a reminder that winter's grip was loosening. When they reached the threshold, Arvid paused. The crowd quieted. Only the creak of the wooden door and the soft shifting of boots on stone could be heard. Then, lifting the bell, he rang it once, letting the sound flow into the dusk. It was not loud, yet every ear caught it. The note drifted like mist, rising toward the hill, sinking toward the harbor, and settling over the fields beyond. People sighed as though they had been waiting for breath itself. Some bowed their heads, others simply looked upward at the faint stars. Astrid held her grandfather's sleeve tightly, feeling the vibration echo in her bones. She imagined the bell's sound traveling far, reaching orchards where bare branches dreamed of blossom, touching frozen soil that would soon soften for seed. The air after the note felt warmer, even if the temperature had not changed. It was as though Freyr himself had walked through the square and left a trail of light. After the bell faded, villagers shared bread and honeyed drink inside the hall. The hearth crackled, and voices blended in calm conversation. Children played quietly near the fire, weaving reeds into toys. Old women exchanged tales of past summers, when fields bent under golden barley and apples fell heavy into baskets. Astrid listened wide-eyed, picturing the orchards heavy with fruit. She whispered to her grandfather, "Do you think Freyr listens when we gather like this?" Arvid replied, "Yes, child. In every flame, in every seed, and in every heart that chooses kindness. He listens not with ears but with life itself." The talk turned gently toward memory. One fisherman recalled a year when storms had threatened to ruin the planting season. Yet after the bell rang, the weather calmed, and the harvest was plentiful. Another remembered how, during a year of sickness, the bell's chime gave courage to neighbors who cared for one another with shared food and watchful eyes. No one claimed the bell was magic in the way of spells. Instead, they agreed it reminded them to keep faith, to share burdens, and to notice the small signs of change. Freyr's gift, they said, was not only sunlight, but also trust in the turning of time. Outside the hall, the sky grew deeper and clearer. The northern lights sometimes shimmered faintly at this time of year, pale green veils across the dark heavens. Astrid stepped out with a few other children and gazed upward. She thought of the bell's sound rising into that wide sky, perhaps joining with the lights. One elder told her softly that in some tales the northern lights were the pathways of spirits or the reflections of shields in the heavens. Astrid wondered if Freyr's golden boar might trot across those lights, leaving sparks that humans saw as colors. She smiled at the thought, feeling a gentle closeness between myth and night. Back inside, music began. A pair of bowed strings played slowly, their tones winding, like smoke. Someone struck small chimes in rhythm, creating a gentle pulse that reminded Astrid of the bell itself. The people began to move in a slow circle, a dance that was less about steps than about presence. They turned together, their shadows flickering on the walls. their hands linked loosely. The rhythm of the dance was like a heartbeat, steady and calm. Astrid and her grandfather joined, moving carefully so the old man's steps remained sure. She felt surrounded by warmth, by neighbors, by the soft certainty that the seasons always return. Later, when the circle slowed and the music rested, Arvid told Astrid about older times, when people honored solstices with fires on hills. They lit great flames, he said, to call back the sun on its longest journey. But here we learn to trust a smaller light. One bell, one hearth, one gathering. The god does not always need grand offerings. Sometimes he comes more easily to the quiet sound that everyone can hear in their own way. Astrid leaned close, thinking that a single sound could indeed be enough to hold so many hearts. The hearth's embers glowed lower as the evening wore on. People began to leave, stepping carefully across icy stones toward their homes. They carried the calm with them, a warmth that no cloak could provide. Arvid and Astrid lingered, tidying the hall and banking the fire. When they finally stepped outside, the air was crisp, but not harsh. The stars seemed closer, their silver light reflected on the river. Arvid held the bell once more, letting Astrid run her finger along its smooth curve. "Do you feel it?" he asked. She nodded. "It feels alive." He smiled. "That is because it carries hope, and hope is never cold." As they walked home, the village was quiet, except for the drip of water and the occasional call of a night bird. Astrid felt no fear. She carried the memory of the bell's note within her, and it seemed to shield her from the dark. The path glimmered faintly with frost, but her steps were light. By the time they reached their door, she was drowsy. The little bronze bell rested on the table once more, shining in the lantern glow, and the house seemed filled with a promise that even in the long night, summer was on its way. That night, Astrid dreamed of orchards in bloom. She saw white petals drifting through warm air, heard bees humming, and felt grass soft beneath her feet. In her dream, the little bell rang again, and the sound was carried by swallows across fields, by rivers toward the sea, and even into mountains where snow lingered. Everywhere it touched, life stirred. When she woke before dawn, she could still feel the echo of the note in her chest. The house was quiet, except for the murmur of the hearth. Her grandfather was already awake, sitting by the fire, carving a new handle for a tool. He looked up and smiled, as though he too had been dreaming of blossoms. "Good morning, child," he said softly. "The bell has done its work." Days passed, and the village slowly shifted. Snow withdrew from the fields, and soil darkened with moisture. Farmers began to test the earth, pressing seeds into furrows with careful hands. Children skipped along paths without the heavy weight of winter boots. The river ran clearer, carrying away broken ice, its voice stronger now. Astrid often followed her grandfather to the orchard, where bare branches showed tiny buds. She touched them gently, as though greeting old friends. "Each one is like a promise," Arvid told her. "Small, but certain." And when she thought back to the bell's tone, she realized it had sounded exactly like this, fragile yet sure. One evening, when the sky blushed with long twilight, Arvid shared another tale of Freyr. He told Astrid that in some stories, Freyr was given the gift of Alfheim, the land of light elves, as a child. That land was said to be filled with brightness and growth, a place where joy was natural as breathing. "It shows us," he explained, "that even a god of harvest was once a child, receiving gifts. So we too may receive gifts from the turning year, if we are ready to notice them." Astrid thought quietly about that. She liked the idea that gods could begin with smallness too, just like seeds, just like bells. At times, travelers passed through the village and heard the story of the summer bell. Some said it reminded them of their own customs. In far places, people lit candles, or sang songs at dawn, or tied ribbons to trees to welcome warmer days. Each ritual, no matter how different, carried the same hope. that light returns. Astrid listened carefully to these stories, collecting them like shells from a beach. She began to see that her village was part of a larger pattern, that people everywhere made gentle marks upon the turning of seasons, so the world might feel less vast, less uncertain. As spring deepened, the bell remained on the table by the hearth. It was not rung again until the next year, for its sound was meant to be rare, like the first flower opening. Yet its presence glowed quietly in the room. When neighbors visited, they glanced at it with fondness, as though greeting an old companion. Astrid sometimes polished it with the same careful motions her grandfather had shown her, circles of cloth that revealed a hidden shine. She whispered to it, not asking for miracles, but offering thanks, for apples that would come, for lambs in the fields, for evenings filled with calm. One night, after the day's work was done, Arvid and Astrid sat by the doorway watching stars. The air was gentle now, no longer biting. Frogs sang in the marsh, and the river's song was quick with freedom. Arvid spoke quietly. "Do you see how the year has turned? We began with stillness, and now we sit in motion. But the bell reminds us that change need not be feared. It can be welcomed." Astrid leaned against his arm, feeling the truth of his words settle like a blanket. Change was not loud. It was soft, like a note drifting into dusk. In later years, when Astrid grew older and her grandfather's hands grew slower, she remembered these nights most clearly. She remembered the soft chime that seemed to shape the whole village's mood. And when at last the task passed to her, to lift the bell at dusk and let it ring, she did so with steady hands. She felt the same stillness spread through neighbors, the same warmth rise from the earth. The ritual continued, small but enduring, like a flame protected from wind. Some say that the gods favor grand temples. Yet in this story, the god of sunlight and harvest was honored by a bell no larger than a hand, in a village no larger than a map's dot. Its power was not in size, but in meaning. And perhaps that is the truth of many myths. They teach us that greatness begins in humble places, and that even the smallest sound can carry far when it is joined to hope. So tonight, as you rest, you may imagine that sound yourself, the gentle bronze note of Freyr's summer bell. Picture it drifting into your own room, blending with the hush of night air, the steady rhythm of your breath. Let it remind you that seasons turn, that light always returns, and that patience is a kind of strength. In one telling, the bell carries the god's blessing. In another, it simply carries human care. Either way, it is enough. It is more than enough. May your dreams be like Astrid's, filled with orchards and gentle rivers. May you wake to the promise of warmth, no matter how long the winter has seemed. And may you always find comfort in the small rituals that open great doors of light. Thank you for listening to this story of Freyr's Summer Bell, a tale from the north made soft, for the heart. If you enjoyed it, I invite you to join again for more myths told in this quiet way. For now, close your eyes, let the night hold you, and rest. Good night.